All right, day 21. Okay, today we're talking about how do you be strategic with food at social events. Okay, this is going to be very important video, so make sure that you bookmark this and potentially take notes and watch it over again if you need to. Okay, a lot of the points that I'm covering here again are going to be very salient that you really catch on to this and apply it. Okay, so when it comes to social events, I think it's important to realize, right, when you're eating out, right, again, you know, when you're eating out, you're going to have much less control over the food choices that, you know, you have. But I want to say that, you know, even though you have less control, it doesn't mean you have no control at all. You still have control, and you understanding that you do have, you know, the ability to make basically good choices, right, is going to empower you to make them, right? So when it comes to social events, there are different ways to think about this, right? I'm going to give you a couple. One is to really ask yourself what is the emotional importance of that particular meal itself. So say, you know, you have 2 days, right? Maybe one day it's like it's a Tuesday night, you just, you know, finished work and you're like tired and stressed and, you know, whatever, it's only Tuesday, but you've, you know, had a long week at work already. And on the other hand, you know, maybe you're comparing that to maybe just an anniversary, your 5th anniversary of your wife or whatever it is, right? Those 2 days have completely different levels of emotional importance, right? And, you know, it's likely that you're probably going to, you know, eat more than you want to on both of those days, right? But when does it make more sense to do it? Definitely the anniversary night, right? So viewing and asking yourself what is the emotional importance of that particular day. Do I really want to, you know, be, you know, spending more calories here? Or can I, like, you know, make a better, like a good enough decision now and, you know, have that for, you know, a future event or whatever it is, right? But basically it is not viewing every opportunity as an opportunity to go out, go crazy and binge and all of that, right? Because that's not what we want. So being able to pick and identify days that make sense and still enjoy ourselves on those days. Okay, I think that's important. Another way to think about this is in terms of like your expectations, right? Is this specific meal a fat loss meal, or is it like a satisfaction, like a life satisfaction kind of meal, right? And this is gonna also depend on, again, the phase of nutrition that you're in, right? And also, you know, how deep potentially in a deficit you are at, where you are in respect to your goals, blah, 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 all of that, right? So if you are, you know, deep in a deficit and, you know, you're really pushing for fat loss and maybe you have a beach vacation in 2 weeks, you know, it's likely that all of your meals leading up to that should be more dialed, right? It's more fat loss focused, right? If you are in a maintenance phase, right, and, you know, you are still trying to figure out this like 85-15 kind of ratio and, you know, fitting in meals with your friends and, you know, eating out mindfully when you go out with them, then, you know, you're definitely still in the maintenance phase and you can still, you know, afford to have a little bit more of like leeway, right? But I think it's important to really be really honest with ourselves and ask ourselves, what are our goals? Do we have specific timelines? And what are our expectations? Because if we are, you know, behaving in a certain way that doesn't line up with our expectations, then, you know, we're only setting ourselves up for disappointment and just failure in a sense, right? So that's not what we want. So another way to think about the fat loss side of things is that, you know, if your goal is predominantly fat loss and your fat loss has been slow in the past couple of weeks or months, then potentially you need to be a little bit more dialed in and focused, right, going forward. So potentially the next couple of meals and over the next week or so or month even needs to be more dialed in, needs to, you know, have a little bit more or less flexibility in that sense, right? I think the whole point here is that, you know, it's a conscious decision. Again, like I said, it's not an impulsive choice that you're making. And, you know, we're all adults, so we get to own the consequences of our decision, right? It's like kind of, for lack of a better analogy, it's like, you know, you can't put your finger into like fire and like, you know, hope to not be burned. It's like you're going to be burned, right? So you deciding to put your finger into the fire is like, you got to own that decision, if that makes sense. Okay, for someone that, you know, kind of eats out a lot, right? These are a couple of things that I want you to like work through and think about. So firstly, ask yourself, you know, how often does it currently happen, right? Is it something that, you know, you foresee to be a recurring occurrence? Yeah, or is it something that it's just a one-off thing, or, you know, it's just a weekly thing, right? what is the frequency like for you currently? Because if it's something that is happening like every day, then it's going to be much more difficult for you to really dial in and lose like fat on a consistent basis compared to somebody that only has that meal out once a week, for example, right? And I think here being really clear what is your current situation, right, allows us to come up with a game plan for you. Okay. When it comes to eating out specifically, here are a couple of tips. Okay, so the first thing is to balance your calories. So look at the rest of your meals in the day, right? You're eating out, maybe that's one meal in a day, but what are the rest of the meals that you're having that are still within your control, right? Try to still stick within that total calorie goal that you've been given, right? And maybe that means reducing the amount of carbs and fats that you are eating in the previous meals so that you can give yourself more leeway for that particular meal that you're having out. Okay. A good way to do this, I kind of said lower carbs, lower fats, but also you're just making sure that also you're getting your protein in, because usually when you're eating out, it's kind of hard to get protein from a good source outside. If you can, great, but if you realize that you're struggling with it, then you might want to front load on that protein. It's a good hack that I like. And I think just generally mindset wise, when it comes to nutrition on days when you are eating out, is to kind of have a good enough approach, right, or mindset. You're not trying to be perfect, right? Again, this is going to depend, on what state or what point in your fat loss phase are you in, right? But for most of us, aiming for good enough is good enough, right? You don't need to be perfect, like 100%, right? The next thing is, don't go to the restaurant or to the event like so hungry. Like, make sure that you are going there and maybe you're not like your stomach is not completely empty and you're like would eat anything inside, right? Try to put yourself into that situation where maybe you pre-ate and you can go to the restaurant and eat what you want to eat mindfully, but not everything inside just because you're like just hungry, right? A couple of other things. Be present at the meal, right? I think this is a interesting one. So put the phone down, eat slowly through your food, enjoy the conversations and the company. Feels weird, I have to remind people about this, but it's true. Basically, you're going out to engage in like being social, right? So food is a part of it, but don't want that to consume us and want to really again enjoy the company, enjoy the reason that you went out in the first place. So that's just that. The next thing is kind of pre-planning. So before you even head to the restaurant, maybe which restaurant you're going to, right? Look up the menu ahead of time. It's really helpful, right? Pick 1 to 2 things that stand out to you that would fit your macros, and would fit basically be healthy options for you, right? Pick those ahead of time and already kind of make that decision in your head. You're going to get that. You're not going to be swayed by whatever your friend or your family orders. That helps, okay? When you're at the restaurant itself, right, you could do things like eating your protein and vegetables first, right? That's going to help fill you up such that maybe you have less space for the rest of the other things and less likely to just like graze on whatever's in front of you. I would recommend you to kind of like avoid things like, bread baskets, things like chips and guac that don't really do much. They're just there, for you to nibble on. So just, stick to whatever you decided you're going to eat, and that's going to really help you. A couple of other things when you're eating out is shared plates. I think this is quite a big thing in like Asian culture. People tend to like order food to share and try and, all of that. It kind of makes it hard to track and also keep track of like what you are eating or how much you have eaten. So what I would say is, if you decide to, share food with other people, ask for a separate serving plate of your own, right? And then portion out what you're going to have, right? And then track that, right? If you're just going to take like a scoop or every 5 minutes from like the sharing plate, you're going to forget what you had and you're not going to log it accurately, right? So that helps. When you are in doubt, right, order a lean piece of meat and vegetables and a carb sauce, right? Keep it simple. Something else that I really like to do is to overestimate the amount of like oils in that particular meal that I'm eating out. Honestly, when you are eating out, things like butter, things like olive oil, cooking oils are very caloric dense. And again, the chef doesn't care, doesn't care about your macros, doesn't care about your fat loss goal. They care about making the food tasty so you come back, right? So overestimating that when you are tracking helps you to, factor that in, right, into your daily calorie goal, and make the necessary changes and adjustments to the rest of the meals prior to that. Okay, and the last one, which is honestly very helpful, is when you are eating out, to finish your meals at 70 to 80% of fullness, right? Don't eat to your 120% full. You already know that the meal out is going to be, harder to track. It's going to be more like heavier in terms of calories. You might be drinking, all these different things, right? Your friends might order dessert. So many things could happen that you really just want to buffer, like give yourself a bit more of a buffer, a bit more of a leeway. And how I would do that is to, instead of eating to 100%, just eat to 70 to 80% and stop there. All right, I hope this sort of helps you with a couple of tips and tricks on how to navigate eating out, because the truth is, like, social events is gonna happen, right? We are social creatures, so it's definitely going to happen, and rather than trying to avoid it completely, we need to find a way to, work with these events built in and still see progress through that.